先开始好了。然后这个讲座是那个 Science Word Switch， 然后基本上就是反正请科学家来谈艺术。可是因为这场比较特别，因为正好 Berdnaunt 在台湾参展，然后是那个气象的气候幻事在凤甲美术馆，所以他正好来，那我们就请他来讲一下这个疯狂科学这样。那第一场我们这个讲座的第一场其实是天文。就找了一个从 NASA 回来的女生，然后来讲跟天文相关的艺术案例嘛。那这场之前我们就有介绍到 Berdnaunt 的作品，然后我们第二场那个时候是有基因工程，第三场是脑科学嘛，所以我们第四场还会有一个太空政策的，然后来讲星际战跟太空殖民。他不是科学，但是因为这个人的研究非常特别这样。那另外就是，所以今天是请Berdnaunt 来讲他的作品中比较科学部分，比如说他怎么样在展场中射一朵云啊，然后另外就是他怎么样去面对这种，他对自然非常有兴趣，然后就是他在面对自然跟这种科学方法中创作艺术，他是怎么样看待这样。那所以其实今天中间我们不设翻译，但是 Q&A 的时间，如果大家有什么问题，我们可以帮忙做翻译这样。然后今天的讲座時間大概会是40到50分钟，然后后面就是 Q&A time 这样。好。
Well, welcome everybody. I'm Berdnaunt Smilde. I'm a visual artist. I make installations and sculptures, often corresponding to site, reacting on the architecture and history of a space. And well, Yongling asked me to give a talk in the series of the science workplace. And well, even though my work might look very, well, scientific, it's not really much high-tech equipment involved, so it's not that scientific as you might think. But many of my works, although they may appear to be functional, many of them are predetermined to fail in the end. So it's most of the time it's due to whether they're the material or even the perspective as a viewer. But the prospect in my work is often just a facade, and it deals with ideas about perfection and the ideal. So, and on the other hand, it falls short, and that's why it shows also its impermanence. So I'm not particularly interested in nature, but there's something ungraspable about nature which I'm interested in. And through ages, well, because I think nature is the only thing we cannot control, and that's why well, people through centuries have projected many ideas and myths around nature. For instance, a cloud can mean many things. It can stand for the divine, but also for good luck and fertility. But on the other hand, also it's a sign of threat and misfortune. Even in cartoons, it's being used as a sign of disappearance or bad luck. So this kind of duality you can find in most of my works. And that's also what I really like about this work from Achenbach. You cannot really tell whether here the storm is coming up or it's fading away. It's in between moments, which I find really interesting. And that's also what I'm going to show you some examples of my work, and I want to start with this one because it kind of shows my interest in how I work. So lots of my work deals with this, well, situations of an in-between state, in between construction and deconstruction, and it often appears to be, well, it's not really functioning, and you cannot really tell what's going on. So it's almost open for interpretation. In this case, this painting, you cannot really tell if it's being installed or deinstalled. But the man in the painting, well, he doesn't know himself either. He's kind of bored, waiting for something to happen. And in this case, it's the context of the museum, actually, the location that provides this meaning to this painting. And this was shot, by the way, in the National Gallery in Dublin. And to continue with another work, which is also really about the location, which is important. And in 2009, I participated in a residency in Ireland. one of the small communities, a city called Eskieten. And when I was looking for information, I got directed to Eskieten in Wisconsin. And it seems that most of the inhabitants of that town of Ireland, well, they all moved to America due to the potato famine in the 1840s. And some of the people of Eskieten set up a new town in Wisconsin, which they also named Eskieten. So I found it kind of curious when I was looking for information that the first building I saw was a barn in America, and the original town hadn't been photographed yet. So what I did was I copied that specific barn and made a facade. I put this on the most resembling location in the original town of Eskieten in Ireland. So it's almost like a billboard, you could say. It's about 3 by 9 meters. And the idea was that if the Google photo car would come by to capture the original town, that this image would be picked up in both Eskietens. This building would exist in both Eskietens. In 2012, I found out that Google actually did finish that work, and that they put the image on. They did come by, and even 3 years after I put the work up there, I was only on the show for 3 weeks, but I was lucky. So I really like that idea of transition, where you take something from the internet and place it in the real world, where it will be captured and placed back online. So it really questions reality, and the interesting aspect about it I find, and also I like that lots of installations when they kind of work in between reality and representation in a way that they cannot really function. Unflattened, this is also a piece that's it's going to be in the show, and I projected the color spectrum onto a landscape, idealizing the landscape in a way. So the suggestion of a rainbow can stand for a sign of perfection in bronze, but this one is turned upside down, so you kind of question these values again. And what initially looks like an idealized landscape can also be an apocalyptic image, maybe, almost like the movie of Lars von Trier, Melancholia, where you have the planet going down. So the title "Unflattened" refers to a Photoshop tool where you can merge an image. So this is still almost like an image that consists of several layers on top of each other, and also this rainbow kind of continues outside the work onto the building. The projection is made with a prism, and it's projected onto the work. And I kind of like the idea of a prism because it kind of shows us how we perceive things around us. Because everything we see is kind of we perceive because of the reflection of the light. It's kind of this tiny piece of glass shows that in a very direct way. It's kind of teaching in a way as well. The common Spiele works are a bit about the same idea. There are also freestanding walls that refer to interiors or parts of it maybe, and so the images emerge from old postcards. And these ideal images are kind of blocked by clinical white tiles. And if you walk around them, they kind of flip-flop in between space and non-space. In a way, you could say they kind of denying themselves as just material that's left. So you could say there's a contrast between the functional and also the idyllic. It's just as a poster at the dentist at the ceiling. To distract you from the pain, almost in a clinical setting. And the postcards I found really interesting. And also, the postcards kind of came up in the early 1900s due to a law in the States, which they were now allowed to write on the backside of a card, and from then the image on the front side became important almost as a souvenir from an exotic land. So it's always an idealized image, and there's not much. There isn't any disorders in it, and it's kind of like it's about the way we look at the landscape. and it kind of functioned as a mediator between our expectations and what reality is. This work is called Conditioner Series. I've made several of those, and they're a ventilation shaft which goes around the gallery and well, it's shaping after the architecture in the space. And what it does is it converts the air from the gallery into antiseptic air. So really like a very strong hospital smell. And well, this hospital smell for me associates with sickness and death. But on the other hand, also it's clean, of course, and antiseptic. It's free from any bacteria, and therefore it's safe. So again, also here you kind of question where you are and if it's safe maybe in that location or truly safe. Also, well, this was obviously made by hand and it's kind of eye level, so the public really has to go in between the work. You can see it's very temporary. When I was looking for how to make clouds, I kind of run into this material. It's called aerogel, and aerogel is the lightest solid material on Earth. It consists of...
It's made by air. It's made by air, actually. It's
yeah.
Like 90s, it was developed by NASA. During the 90s.
90s? I thought earlier.
I thought it was 90s, and it's made by air, so that's why it's very light.
Yeah, it consists of 99% air. It's a dried and pressed silicon gel, and NASA used it for collecting interstellar dust particles. They would scrap them out, I think. And so here I put them on small models of exhibition spaces. For me also to resemble the idea of the Nimbus works. But what I really liked about it is also that it's just basically air on an empty space. And also I like that it's an artificial material and it doesn't really have a function as a monolith like this. It's been used in different ways for their isolating value in clothing. It was their small particles. But as such, it doesn't have a function. And also, in a way, I kind of like this material because it kind of shows our human urge to try to compete with nature because the density is just a little bit bigger than air. And the works, by the way, aren't very big. They're only 7 centimeters big. Okay, yeah. Right. Well, the Nimbus works are, they're actually a temporary presentation on a specific location. You could see them as a sign of misfortune maybe, or an element from a classical painting. And so they only exist for a few seconds, and I kind of like that temporary aspect of the work. So the physical aspect is really important, but in the end, there's only a photograph that remains, and that kind of serves as a document. This work is the first work I made in Kobe, and it's a miniature space. So I can show you here. The space is about 1 meter high, and but it's a miniature space, and therefore it's ideal for testing things you in the beginning don't think you could realize. And what it is, so I shaped this exhibition space after my ideal perception of a museum space, and that is the National Gallery in Dublin, which you saw earlier. And I tried to present the cloud. And I was imagining walking through an empty museum hall with nothing to see, just for a cloud in a corner of the room, almost as a ultimate image of disappointment as a counterbalance to what we would expect to find in a museum hall. And from there, I started to work in real-size spaces. So I make the clouds using smoke and water, and I adapt the space where necessary. So in this case, I put blue film on the windows, and well, basically everything is arranged within that frame. And this image, well, it ended up on the internet and was spread very fast, and that's basically how it all kind of started. So making a cloud, well, it always fails. It's just a very short moment you transport the idea of a cloud inside the space. And that's also for me what's more important, is the idea and what we project on it. So the space you can see as a plinth for the work, and also it provides a scenario. So all the spaces I use, they have been used as exhibition spaces, and that also relates to the history of that space and what happened there. For instance, this is an old castle in Belgium. Once a year it's been used for exhibitions, and until the 70s this used to be a mental institution as well. So therefore you kind of see a strange contrast in the architecture of this space. I kind of like it because it has a filmic character to it as well. And well, every space works differently. This is due to the air circulation and kind of also the shape therefore changes. This space looks like miniature space actually, but it's quite a bit odd. This was made in The Hague, typical Dutch architecture. But due to there was warm air up there in the top of the building, and pretty much cold air down below it, around the floor. So you can see that the air kind of stretched, and it almost turned into more like a weather situation. And those strings you can see underneath the cloud, that's what's happened. So with water, so I spray water around, and it kind of sticks to the smoke and makes it heavier, and therefore you can see it coming down like that. This is a space in Groningen. And well, you can tell that the architecture plays an important role in this series. And in a way you could say I'm chasing representations of an ideal space, and clouds are also for me a way of questioning this. This space is a space just above the gallery in San Francisco, and this building, the green room, was shaped after the mirror hall at Versailles. So actually it is an American interpretation of an ideal space, and I kind of like that idea. So you're kind of wondering what is more important, is it the space or the cloud, and who is showing who? I always like to question for myself, is whether the cloud could change the space, like after it's gone, if it would look different to that location. An example of also an ideal space, this is the Bonnefantenmuseum in Maastricht, and even though this is not an exhibition space, it's the staircase leading towards the exhibition space, but it is a space with beautiful architecture, and also that is really in between inside and outside, so it kind of needs to work very well. And I'm going to show some projects now. Yeah, my practice as an artist kind of changed with this Nimbus work, and I was offered many opportunities for collaborations which otherwise never happened, and I started to walk from working in artist-run spaces towards galleries, and it kind of changed differently. And in 2013 I was approached by Harper's Bazaar to work on a series with 4 designers. And so I work with Karl Lagerfeld, Donatella Versace, Albert Albas, and Dolce & Gabbana to make a cloud with them. And I was kind of interested in seeing if it would work to incorporate a person into the work and see if I could make a portrait. But at first I thought they were all going to be in the same image, but yeah, ego-wise they needed all their own space, so we ended up going to 4 different locations in 3 days. It was kind of hectic, and also the fashion industry is really fast. So normally it takes about days for me to prepare, but this we can only do in a few hours. And yeah, there were also all kinds of rules. In the end, I really had to fight to get my work placed well in the magazine as well. It's really a bit overdone. But there were all kinds of rules, like so many % of the face should be visible, and these guys should be equally tall because one was smaller than the other one, and yeah, that was kind of new. And she almost collapsed after 15 minutes and she left. But yeah, we had image already. But he was kind of cool to work with. So in the end, yes, it was a great experiment, but the cloud, well, I think the work functions better in space by itself. There are different projects in the Berdnaunt Museum. Due to the camera speeder works, I was asked by the curator of the museum to think about an exhibition where we combine my work with the collection of the museum. And I never made a show like that. And that was kind of interesting to do because I could just pick whatever I wanted. And it was nice to work with her because she kind of approached everything from scientific, or from a more art historical perspective, and I could just choose from my own visual interest, basically. So also was a nice way for me to combine my work with, well, big artists and see how the connections will come together. So I picked work from, you can see the videos in the back, from Bowman Signer, so very well about failure and very tragic, but also humorous. René Daniels combined with speed of work. Gordon Jan Diewitz is a Dutch photographer, really about photography itself. And Michael Krauss is a German artist. And in the end, in the last room, I made a new series of camera speeding. And for me, it was kind of difficult to put a show together like this, because also I would see if my work would stand in a space like that, an ideal space, as a museum, other than I was used to working in relation to smaller spaces, but also have a connection to that space, and that was kind of difficult. But in the end, I was quite happy with that. After next week, I'll be going on a residency to Boulder in Colorado, and I'll be working in the Contemporary Museum of Art in Boulder for 6 weeks. And an idea I have, I wanted to work on that idea of the rainbow a little bit further, and something I wanted to test for some time was to see if I could project the color spectrum by using a lighthouse. So to put a prism in front of the lighthouse and see if I could make a rainbow onto the landscape. So that as a viewer you will have just a very short moment where the rainbow would come by and maybe reflect on some trees or some other infrastructures, just for a short bit. But actually you're kind of forcing a natural phenomenon onto the landscape. I'm kind of interested to see how that is. That experience might go, but what I want to, I don't think this I can do with a normal prism. So I want to work with the university in Colorado to see if we could make a crystal, liquid crystal lens or something to make this possible. Because yeah, otherwise I don't think it will be strong enough. And yeah, so that's also kind of new for me. I would say, I hope it will work. In the end, I want to show you a video that kind of shows the process of how I make the clouds. And this is a work by Martin Creator. But he made it in the tower of the St. Peter in Cologne. It is a church, and it's an active church, but for the past 25 years they also giving commissions to artists to react to that space. And I've been working there to produce a cloud in that space. Last year we'll have a show there after the summer. But there was a German broadcast, German television that came by to make a documentation about that work. And for me, it's not the most ideal way of presenting the work, but it kind of shows how it comes about. So I'll just start that now.
For enhanced pictures, but real clouds in real rooms. Dutch artist Berdnaunt Smilde calls this series of pictures Nimbus. He's fascinated by ambiguity.
Clouds can be many things, and they can be threatening, but on the other hand, they can also be like a divine situation almost. So there's always this duality in the work as well. Same as it builds up, but at the same time it falls apart again. So it's just there for a few seconds. So it's really about something that happened on that location, is then afterwards is gone.
Smilde, who lives in Amsterdam, has been creating indoor clouds since 2010. He's been invited to work at the St. Peter's Church in Cologne. The church nave is regularly used for art projects. The pictures created here will be on view in his next exhibition.
The space is almost like the plinth for the work, and I like it when there's a double connection as an exhibition space, but also as a form of use, so in this case as a church.
Smilde's cloud pictures cost up to €8,000, and they are less science and technology heavy than you might think.
I work with a fog machine and with water, and it's just water vapor that I use. And the idea is that there's a burst of smoke going into the space, and I build a wall with water vapor on the position whereabouts I want to position the clouds, so that should be in the middle somewhere here. So I make the space wet and cold, and build a wall of vapor where the smoke bumps into, and the water kind of sticks to the smoke, makes it heavier and pours it down, so it keeps it together for just a few seconds maybe, depending on the space, because every space works differently.
Lamps in the room imitate the sun. The way the smoke refracts the light determines the mood of the cloud. And in order to get the perfect shot, Smilde spends days running tests. And during that phase, he doesn't like people to watch.
By doing a performance, you will make a different work. I think then it will be about a collective memory, and people will be standing here. And then the work will also be about how do you make something. And for me, it's more about the idea that counts, and the idea of this cloud inside of space. So therefore, I just want to have this image.
Smilde's pictures are fascinating. Last year, he staged renowned designers alongside his clouds for the international fashion magazine Harper's Bazaar. He often enlists the help of a professional photographer. After all, he's striving for technically perfect pictures. The U.S. magazine Time chose his clouds as one of the most important inventions of 2012.
It has spread around quite fast via the internet, and I think it's like a really universal, timeless image maybe. That's why so many people are like it in a way.
Berdnaunt Smilde's cloud pictures foster awareness of transience by capturing it for posterity.
All right, going video. So, if there are any questions?
有问题，他简报其实很短，因为他讲话很快，然后所以因为他就是还蛮紧张，有时候他就会说他觉得他自己不知道就是怎么讲这样，然后可是原本技术上或任何上对作品上创作上就是有关心的问题都可以问他这样，然后如果就是可以帮忙翻译这样， 有吗？
I don't know what you just said, but I have a question.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry. I might have missed it because I was a bit late at the beginning. But you said something about disappointment. This was at the very beginning. You said that the image was disappointing.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. Mr. Christian. Can you say something more about this disappointment?
Yeah, I kind of thought if you would walk into that space and there was a cloud, almost like an image that could just rain on you. That kind of idea. There was nothing, just a piece of cloud hanging in space. That as an image of disappointment. To go somewhere and there was nothing, that could also start to rain.
That would be awesome. But
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I have a question with the aerogel. Like,
Yeah.
why it was so small? The aerogel sculpture.
It's very hard to get large pieces. So most of the pieces are rest pieces, they're leftovers basically from other stuff. So I have a few pieces that are a bit bigger, but it's very hard to get by and also very expensive.
Where
Yeah.
did you get that?
From a company in Sweden.
Okay.
And also found that like the small sculptures in a way are more monumental than larger ones. As a small model kind of function better, I think.
So small. One picture.
Yeah.
How do you control the figure of the cloud before you really produce the cloud? I mean, the figure of the shape.
Well, I can control it a bit with the water I use. So I can decide. I always, depending on the space, I look for. I have an idea of what I want.
Oh, yeah.
So how big the cloud should be, where it should go, and what. Well, it should be a long one or a very round one. But other than that, I don't have much control over it. So it's constantly testing. So therefore, I just start working from different positions, and every time the light also changes. So I make hundreds of pictures, and then in the end select one to be the work. And most of the time, it can also be. It's very difficult because in one picture the light's better, and the other one the shape is better. So you're constantly searching for that ideal archetype cloud, basically. But it's hard to control.
有人还有问题吗？也可以私底下聊天啊，但是。
I would like to know how you associate yourself with painting on the surface and painting clouds in the space.
In a way, clouds have an important role in Dutch painting as well, because we don't have any mountains, we have a very low horizon. So there's always been many clouds in paintings, and therefore in that way you could say I'm working in the tradition of Dutch painting maybe, and also in every culture they work differently. As here they have mountains and the clouds here have had a totally different role. Like they're mystifying, but also they're being used as a tool for perspective drawing. So
How about technical wise? Like, what does it feel like to draw in a space? I mean, to paint in a space, or does it feel more like sculpture?
No, it doesn't feel more like sculpture. In the end, it's just going to be an image as well. But working in a space is maybe different than working on a canvas. But you're working with the same things basically, also light, but you're working in three-dimensional to create a two-dimensional image. So that might be the difference. But in the end, it's also flat. But I do see them as temporary sculptures.
还有问题吗？不好意思，是讲是有需要就是解释或什么吗？
I have a question. Because the opportunity for the visitor to experience the cloud is very limited because the cloud will vanish very soon. So, as an artist, in what way you prefer to let the visitor to experience your work? Because most of the time, they are printed images or video. And would you like to have the visitor have more opportunities to experience on site?
I've tried it a few times, But yeah, then it will really be a performance, and I'm not really a performer, so it's really, really difficult. And also, the works are made really to function from basically one point of view. So then you have to have your crowd just standing behind you, and if you have a large crowd, it will also infect the space. It will warm up, it will change, and it's not ideal to watch because it's just a few seconds basically that's there, and then there's a whole process of constantly repeating it. So it's not very interesting process to watch maybe.
Okay.
So yeah, for me that photograph represents that idea much better. Because yeah, otherwise yeah, it's really about how you make things and.
But during the film, when you show it in the film, you consider the sound of the film has relationship how the cloud form.
Sorry?
The process of the cloud form, it has sound, right?
Yeah.
And in your film.
You mean from the machines? You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like to make the sound of a machine less, or what?
Oh, in the film. Yeah, that doesn't really. No, it's part of the process, and I think that, yeah, if you want to make a video, then it's already about that process. For me, if I want, it's not for me a way to show work. It's not the work itself. And in video, you always have to have this narrative line, and that's kind of annoying about it. So when you're talking about clouds, it's always okay. Can you look at the sky? So you really have to build up a story like that, and it's.
So you prefer show in image?
Yeah.
The pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you going to make the lifetime of how longer?
Yeah, I would want to test where the boundaries are of how well, in an ideal space, like very cold and wet, see how long it can last for.
Okay. So it's more like you also have to come to something like season.
Yeah, in winter time, in really cold spaces that would work. Yeah, but I also kind of like that it's not everlasting, and it falls apart in the end. I kind of like that idea about the work as well. So some people do think that you just open a suitcase and it's there for a few months and just take it away again.
When you took in this picture, I saw many clouds or other environments. Do you have a relationship with these pictures and environment potential?
No, it's not. That's not a relation to nature or environment or pollution or those kind of things. No, it's really. I'm really interested in what we could project on the cloud, what it could mean, and also how it's been used in history. And because taking something natural or unnatural and put it taking something natural and put it in an unnatural situation kind of changes already what I want. It's kind of, it can be threatening in a way already, and I kind of like to work with those ideas and meanings.
So when we talk about the clouds in the ink painting, Chinese painting, ink painting,
right?
And so like it's kind of like we have like different ways that expressing clouds in our culture. It's not just turn on. The guy who painted me.
Right.
So like Turner, yes. And I actually, because you used to be a painter, right?
Yeah.
And like
but not a landscape painter.
Okay. And what was the idea of the beginning? Like the clouds. The clouds in art history is a very important subject, but the clouds is always in nature. It's always something you can deal with how do we say, the urban history. But the cloud in indoor, the
ambiguity.
Yes, and well, actually, this idea came from.
You mean in my presentation?
Yes.
Bringing in the painting, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Also to show, I really like the seascape paintings, and also that you cannot really that moment of where you cannot really tell where it's heading to. Like if a storm's coming up or fading away, that situation where you not really can tell where it's going to. That in-between moment I find really attractive, and also most of those paintings are very dark and very heavy, and so not specifically about the cloud, but more about that in-between state.
What's wrong with the rainbow?
What's wrong with rainbow?
Yes, what's wrong with the rainbow? I mean, talk about rainbow because you are making a new one.
Yeah.
Talk about rainbow.
Well, the rainbow is just as you project all the ideas on the cloud and what they can mean. The rainbow has it as well. It's been used in painting and romantic painting as well, almost as a it's always an image of perfection.
Okay.
And by changing that or by forcing it onto a landscape, you're kind of forcing something natural in an unnatural way. That kind of makes you could change your ideas about what it could mean then. And it's not all glory, maybe.
Okay.
Could you say something? What I like about both the rainbow and the clouds, they're both also about reproduction. So, especially what's nice about the rainbow piece is that at the end of the day, there's nothing special about the rainbow. It's just that we're humans and we see color.
Yeah.
And we get to see rainbows and we have metaphors about them. And I think in both of your works, you kind of, or you're producing this cloud, you kind of, in a funny way, destroy what's the myth about the cloud, and the same, and you make it into an object.
Yeah.
And
but it's not for real. I cannot really reach it. It's always a suggestion.
Yeah. But that for me speaks very much about also the viewers, and perception. And I think that this is more of a comment actually. But I find that the most interesting way that it's more about, for me, it's a lot about perception.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It kills the romance, but at the same time, it makes new romance. Because because killing the romance is romantic.
Nice, yeah.
I would like to know more about how you develop the technique, like how you
how I started with.
Yeah, how you started with just water, vapor and smoke, and how you mix it together and to find the formula, if there's any.
Yeah, well, I started with different materials and just researched what I could use for a cloud, and then most of the things end up being hanging from the ceiling or something. But I wanted to have something that could really float in the space, and also smoke kind of really resembles clouds in a way as well. So I spoke to theater people about perfect conditions and what would be the best way
to the professions in the drama, the professions in theater.
Yes, yeah, and that's why I just started. I built a space for myself, also a miniature space, and I just started testing with water, what temperature does and how it works, and also the light is quite important, the backlight for contrast.
So it's more like a DIY project.
It is, but most of my work is. It looks very scientific, but I use everything I can just grab to get an idea together.
So if I put it forward, does it have any relationship with like any scientific institute? Like, did you consult with them, or did you?
No, not for that. No, not for that cloud. But now I would be interested to see where I could take this. I would also be interested in maybe filming it at high speed or something that it would really slow mo down and see how it kind of grows. But initially I just start with an idea and start Legoing it together.
While this was on the social media, were any scientists attracted by this project?
There were some weather people that were interested, and also last year I made a work at Cornell University in Ithaca, and there was a computer scientist that was kind of interested because what he did was he worked with light and how light breaks, and he made programs also for architecture to study how light works in the space. And he was kind of interested also in measuring clouds and what they do, how many light will it reflect. So he said, like, one of your clouds, I could measure it using all the laser and using all the points, I could put it in a program, and then we could make a program about how clouds could possibly break light. That kind of things that are quite interesting. Yeah.
Any more afterward? After Did you took it?
No, I wasn't for not. I just had to go back very quickly. So yeah.
It would be very interesting to see if the computer scientists could actually major into computing, that would be quite amazing.
Yeah, but for me it's sometimes difficult to see those opportunities where it could go to. And that's the interesting thing, because then, scientific look from different approaches, So better people also use these kind of models, sometimes even producing things with smoke to see how clouds build up and.
还有问题吗？
是先帮我那个，难得来台湾一趟，有任何在台湾的创作计划吗？是第一个。另外是，这个作品其实任何空间都可以创作。那他在挑选这个环境的时候，有什么特别的喜好或好意这样子
？The first question is that is there have you think about actually make this work in Taiwan? That's the first question. And the second one is what is the second one? Oh, okay. What kind of environment you think is perfect for this works? So is it any premise or any condition that you think is perfect?
The condition?
Yes.
What kind of space do you think fits your work or fits?
How do you say that?
Well, I would like to have a relationship to exhibition spaces as well, also in relation to the artwork itself. But these spaces can be many things. It's not many of the spaces used to be other former uses. We try to. I wanted to make a cloud here as well in Taiwan. I've been here in September. We tried to find locations. It was kind of hard to find a location actually that would really fit the work, and also to forget the location in the end, and it didn't work.
他其实去年9月的时候有来过了，就是来台北找空间，然后后来试了几次，发现就是有点难，就没有非常适合这样。然后。这样回答到你的问题吗？然后他说条件上他是觉得，因为空间有各种条件，他会就是稍微调节。He actually asked about that, is there some specific speciality for you to choose the environment?
Right. Yeah. Well, the architecture plays an important role. I'm looking for architectural features that kind of are special in the space. But also one space we found here was the Botanical Garden, which was also a beautiful building from I think early 1900s as well. And you also have that relation between inside and outside. So I was kind of interested in working in a space like that for one time as well.
因为它那个是可以调节可以做，然后他说就空间的特点也是在这个作品中扮演很重要的角色，这样，所以他会。就是有些建筑上它本身就有特色，他会希望是建筑本身的特色可以跟一起这样，大概讲对。还有问题吗
Can you tell us about your experience to work with fashion magazine?
Yeah, well that was interesting to do, but it was a good experience for me. But in the end, it isn't really my cup of tea, I must say. It's certainly different. It's too fast, and also for me the work really. I think it's better to show the work without persons, just the cloud in the space, rather than to incorporate people in it. But sometimes it's if you get an opportunity like that, it's interesting to start working on it, because in a way you're thinking, okay, how far will this go, and where will my work lead to? Will it be too much or not? So you kind of have to level out what you could do. But if you get a chance like this, then okay, go for it. See.
Was there any special experience working with Karl Lagerfeld or the guy from the girl from the massage? That's also
Well, Karl Lagerfeld, he was a really open, interested guy. He just came in and sat down and said, let's make some clouds. So, no, you're an idiot, okay. And then he almost trembled over the equipment, so he could have just felt there. But it's also very short. It was just 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe, and you're preparing for it all day. And also, Donatella Fascetti was totally different. She didn't really go into the work. She was just there to publish. Yeah.
还有问题吗？如果没有，我们就私下聊好了。哦，是那 I guess Korean line. I guess we're finished here.
Right.
Yes. There are people that if they have a question,